My name is Ethan, I'm 38 years old, and my wife, Amber, is 35. We've been married for 12 years and together for 15. On the surface, we had what seemed like a great relationship. 2 kids, a cozy house in the suburbs, and steady careers. I work in IT, and Amber manages a boutique clothing store. Life felt solid, like the kind of life people strive for. But now, looking back, I see the cracks that had been forming under the surface for years. Amber is the kind of person who lights up a room. People naturally gravitate toward her. She's confident, quick-witted, and always seems to know what to say to make someone feel important. I'll admit, sometimes that charisma came off as arrogance, but I loved her for it. She had a way of making me feel like the luckiest guy alive. Or at least she used to. Things started changing about a year ago. Amber was always meticulous about her appearance, but suddenly she became obsessed. Expensive facials, gym classes 4 times a week, and a new wardrobe that she claimed was just for the store. I chalked it up to her wanting to feel good about herself, but there were moments when it felt off. Like when she'd leave her phone face down on the counter or be unusually vague about who she was texting. I tried to ignore it at first. Amber's always been fiercely independent, and I didn't want to seem controlling. But those little red flags kept piling up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was a gut feeling, an uncomfortable, gnawing suspicion I buried under layers of denial. After all, she was my wife. We'd promised each other forever, and I never thought I'd have to doubt her. But soon, the truth started to unravel in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The first concrete sign came one Friday evening. Amber had told me she was working late to prepare for a big store event. It wasn't unusual. Her job often required extra hours. But when I offered to bring her dinner as a surprise, she brushed me off, claiming she'd already eaten. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I walked into the kitchen to grab a drink and noticed her laptop was still on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but something in me, the same gnawing feeling that had been bothering me for months, pushed me to check. Her email was open, and I saw a notification from a name I didn't recognize. Jake. It wasn't the message itself that caught my eye, but the subject line, "Can't stop thinking about last night." My heart dropped. My hands were shaking as I clicked on it. The email was short but damning. "Amber, last night was incredible. I've missed you so much. Can't wait to see you again. Let me know when you're free. Jake." I stared at the screen, hoping there was some innocent explanation. Maybe it was an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. But then I saw the thread, a string of messages that made it clear Jake was more than just a friend. They'd been meeting up for months, sharing inside jokes, intimate moments, and memories of the good old days. That's when it hit me. Jake wasn't just some guy. He was Amber's ex-boyfriend from her early 20s. I remembered her mentioning him once, years ago, as the one who got away. Apparently, he was back now, and Amber hadn't hesitated to rekindle whatever they had. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. My stomach churned, my chest ached, and my mind raced with questions. Why would she do this? Why wasn't I enough? How long had she been lying to me? I wanted to confront her right then, but she wasn't home yet. I had no idea where she really was or when she'd come back. All I could do was sit in that dark kitchen, rereading the emails and feeling my world crumble around me. Amber came home around midnight, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers and wine. She was smiling when she walked through the door, but the moment she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, her expression changed. "Why are you still up?" she asked, her voice light but edged with suspicion. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I held up her laptop. "You want to explain this?" My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. She froze, her eyes darting between the laptop and me. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Amber. I saw the emails. From Jake." Her face turned pale, but she quickly recovered, crossing her arms defensively. "You went through my emails? That's such an invasion of privacy. You're really going to make that the issue right now?" I snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "You've been sneaking around with your ex. Lying to me, lying to the kids, lying about everything. Amber rolled her eyes, as if I were overreacting. It's not what you think. Oh, really? Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been cheating on me for months. She sighed dramatically, like I was inconveniencing her. Fine. Yes, Jake and I have been talking. But it's harmless. We're just catching up. You know how important he was to me. Catching up doesn't involve thinking about last night, Amber, I said, my voice rising. How many times have you met him? How far has this gone? She hesitated, and in that pause, I saw the truth. It was only a couple of times, she finally admitted. We had dinner, we talked. That's it. You're lying, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The emails say otherwise. Amber's defensiveness morphed into anger. Why are you making this such a big deal? Jake gets me in ways you never have. I'm not saying I don't love you, but he's different. He's exciting. You've become so predictable, Ethan. That was it. The knife in my chest twisted as her words sunk in. Predictable? I'd built a life for us, provided for her, loved her unconditionally, and that was how she saw me? Boring? Replaceable? I can't believe you, I said, standing up. You're throwing everything away for what? A fling with some loser who couldn't even commit to you the first time. Her eyes flashed with fury. Don't you dare talk about Jake like that. You don't know anything about him. And clearly, I don't know anything about you either. I shot back before storming out of the room. That night, I slept on the couch. Or at least I tried to. My mind wouldn't stop spinning, replaying her words over and over. The love of my life had just admitted she was bored with me. And worse, she didn't seem to care about the destruction she was leaving in her wake. The morning after the confrontation, the house was eerily quiet. Amber avoided me entirely, retreating to the bedroom and only coming out when she was sure I wasn't around. The tension was suffocating, and I could barely look at her without feeling a wave of anger and heartbreak. I needed answers, so I did what I never thought I'd do. I dug deeper. While Amber was out running errands, I went through her phone. She'd been careful, deleting most of her texts and calls with Jake. But not everything. A message in her trash folder caught my eye. Last night was perfect. I'll book the hotel again for next week. Love you. It was from Jake. And it was dated just 2 days ago. I felt like throwing up. All her talk about a couple of dinners and catching up was absolute garbage. She wasn't just lying to me. She was actively making me feel like I was the problem. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to myself for safekeeping. If this was going to turn into a fight, I wasn't going in unprepared. Amber came home later that afternoon, acting like nothing had happened. She walked into the kitchen, humming a tune, and opened the fridge. I couldn't stand her casual attitude, as if she hadn't just set fire to our marriage. We need to talk, I said, standing in the doorway. She froze, milk carton in hand. I thought we already did.
No, Amber.
You talked. You lied. I looked through your phone. I know about the hotel, the dates, everything. Don't even try to deny it. Her face hardened, and she slammed the fridge shut. Unbelievable. First my emails, now my phone? Do you even hear yourself? You're obsessed, Ethan. Don't turn this around on me, I yelled. You've been sneaking around with Jake, sleeping with him, and lying to my face. How do you expect me to react? Like it's no big deal. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there glaring at me. Then, in a voice as cold as ice, she said, maybe if you paid attention to me, I wouldn't have needed Jake in the first place. Her words hit like a slap. My jaw clenched, and I felt my fists tighten at my sides. Don't you dare put this on me. I've done everything for you, for this family. You're the one who decided that wasn't enough. Amber rolled her eyes, like she was bored with the conversation. Whatever, Ethan. Believe what you want. You're not perfect either, you know? Her deflection was infuriating, but it was also a reminder of who she'd become. Someone I didn't recognize anymore. The woman I married, the one who used to look at me like I hung the stars, was gone. In her place was a stranger. Someone cold, selfish, and completely unapologetic. That night, I started sleeping in the guest room. It was clear that whatever we had was falling apart, and I wasn't sure it could be saved. Amber didn't seem to care. If anything, she seemed relieved that I was keeping my distance. The next few days were a blur of avoidance and tension. Every time I looked at her, I saw Jake, and it made me sick. I knew I needed to decide what to do, but my emotions were a whirlwind. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and an ache for the life we'd built that was now crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't sit around stewing in my anger any longer. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. Amber's nonchalant attitude made it clear she wasn't going to give me the truth willingly, so I decided to find it myself. First, I went back through her email and phone records, piecing together timelines. She wasn't as careful as she thought. I found hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, and even a few pictures of her and Jake, arms wrapped around each other, laughing like teenagers. Each discovery felt like another knife to the heart, but I couldn't stop. Then I had an idea. Jake's name was mentioned a couple of times in her calendar. I noticed she'd marked gym sessions and store events on the same days Jake had emailed her about their plans. It was a thin excuse she'd used to cover her tracks, and I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it sooner. But the real kicker came when I decided to reach out to Jake directly. I found him on Facebook. His profile wasn't private, and it didn't take long to confirm it was him. He was exactly as I'd imagined. Smug smile, chiseled jaw, and a highlight reel of pictures that screamed midlife crisis. His posts were filled with cryptic captions about living life with no regrets and second chances. One picture stood out. A blurry photo of 2 glasses of wine on a hotel balcony. It was captioned, "A perfect night with an old flame." The date matched one of Amber's late work nights. I was boiling with rage, but I kept my cool long enough to message him. "Hey Jake, this is Amber's husband, Ethan. We need to talk." To my surprise, he replied almost instantly. "Jake, didn't expect this, but sure. What's up?" "I know about you and Amber. I just want to know the truth. How long has this been going on?" There was a pause, and I could almost feel his hesitation through the screen. Then his response came. "Jake, look man, I'm not trying to cause problems, but Amber and I go way back. She reached out to me first. If you want details, ask her." That response sent me over the edge. Not only was this guy unapologetic, but he was throwing Amber under the bus as if it excused his behavior. I replied with a single sentence. "Stay away from my wife." He didn't respond after that, but it didn't matter. I wasn't finished yet. The next day, I decided to pay a visit to Amber's store. She told me she was working late again, but I had a hunch that wasn't true. Sure enough, when I arrived, one of her employees told me she'd left hours ago. I drove around aimlessly, my mind spinning. Finally, I decided to check the hotel Jake had mentioned in one of his emails. Felt like a long shot, but my gut told me to try. When I arrived, I walked into the lobby and asked the receptionist if a Jake last name had checked in. She looked hesitant but eventually confirmed it. Room 312. My heart was pounding as I headed for the elevator. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew it wouldn't be good. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like an eternity. My stomach churned as I tried to prepare myself for whatever I was about to walk into. When I reached room 312, I stood outside the door for a moment, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear muffled voices inside. A man's laugh, followed by Amber's unmistakable giggle. It took everything in me not to kick the door down. Instead, I knocked, hard and loud. The laughter stopped abruptly, and after a moment of silence, I heard footsteps approaching. The door cracked open, and there he was, Jake. He looked exactly like his photos. Smug, self-assured, and completely unfazed. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with fake politeness. I shoved the door open, forcing him to step back. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice low but seething with anger. Jake didn't even try to stop me as I walked into the room. Amber was sitting on the bed, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. She was wearing a silk robe that wasn't hers, And the sight of her like that, so comfortable, so at home, made my blood boil. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice shaking. "What am I doing here?" I shot back, my voice rising. "What the hell are you doing here, Amber? Don't even try to lie. I know everything." Jake leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, as if this was all some sort of amusing spectacle. "Maybe we should all calm down," he said, his smugness pushing me closer to the edge. "Shut up," I snapped, pointing a finger at him. "This is between me and my wife." Amber stood up, clutching the robe tightly around her. "Ethan, I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure things out." "Figure things out?" I laughed bitterly. "You've been screwing around behind my back for months, and now you're figuring things out? Do you even hear yourself?" Her expression shifted from guilt to defensiveness. "You don't understand, Ethan. I felt trapped for years. You're so focused on your job, the kids, the house. You stopped paying attention to me. Jake. He makes me feel alive again." Her words hit me like a freight train. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she was causing me. Instead, I turned to Jake. "And you? What's your excuse? You think it's okay to mess around with another man's wife?" He smirked, shrugging. "She came to me, man. Maybe you should take a look in the mirror." I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed Jake by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "Say that again," I growled through clenched teeth. "Ethan, stop," Amber shouted, pulling at my arm. "This isn't helping." I let go of Jake, who stumbled back, adjusting his shirt with an annoyed expression. "You two clearly have some things to work out," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. "I'll give you some space." As he walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Part of me wanted to chase him down, but the other part knew he wasn't worth it. The real betrayal wasn't his, it was Amber's. Once the door clicked shut, I turned to her. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How long have you been lying to me?" Amber hesitated, then sighed. "Since last summer. It started as just messages, but it became more." "And you didn't think to stop?" I asked, my voice breaking. "To think about what this would do to me, to the kids?" She didn't answer. She just looked down at the floor, her silence speaking volumes. I stood there, staring at her, my chest heaving. Finally, I said, "You've made your choice, Amber. Don't bother coming home tonight." I walked out of the room without looking back, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. As I made my way to the car, the weight of everything hit me. The betrayal, the lies, the life we'd built together. It was all crashing down around me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to pick up the pieces. When I got home that night, the house felt different. Colder, emptier. Like the life we'd built together had already crumbled. The kids were asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos unraveling around them. I sat in the living room, staring at the photos on the wall, smiling faces from family vacations, birthdays, and holidays. Felt like looking at someone else's life. Amber didn't come home that night, just as I'd told her not to. Part of me expected her to ignore me, to walk through the door and try to smooth things over like she always did. But she didn't. The silence was deafening, and my thoughts were relentless. How had I let it get this far without noticing? How had I been so blind? The next morning, I decided to get ahead of the situation. I called my best friend, Nick, someone I could trust completely. We'd known each other since high school, and he'd always been the first person I turned to when life threw curveballs.
"Hey, man.
"Got a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. What's up?" he said, immediately picking up on the tension in my tone. "I need to talk. It's about Amber." Nick listened patiently as I told him everything, about the emails, the hotel, the confrontation. By the time I finished, I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "Jesus, Ethan. I don't even know what to say. What do you want to do?" That was the million-dollar question. What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to fight for the marriage, for the sake of the kids, for the life we'd built. But another part of me, A bigger part knew I couldn't stay with someone who had so little respect for me, for us. I think I need to end it, I admitted, the words heavy on my tongue. I can't trust her anymore. Nick didn't argue. I get it. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer to explore my options. It felt surreal, sitting in an office discussing divorce, something I never thought I'd have to face. But the lawyer was straightforward, professional, and reassuring. He explained the process, the division of assets, and what custody arrangements might look like for the kids. As I walked out of the office, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, anger, but also a sense of control. For the first time in days, I felt like I was taking steps to regain my life, to protect myself and my children from further damage. Later that evening, Amber finally called. Her name flashed on my phone screen, and for a moment, I debated ignoring it. But I answered, my voice cold and measured. What do you want? Ethan, please. We need to talk, she said, her tone softer than I'd heard in months. I'm sorry for everything. I made a mistake, but I don't want to lose you. I laughed bitterly. A mistake? Amber, this wasn't a mistake. This was months of deliberate choices. You didn't accidentally end up in a hotel room with Jake. She started crying, but I didn't feel the same pang of sympathy I used to. Her tears felt manipulative, a ploy to pull me back in. Please, Ethan, let's figure this out. For the kids, if nothing else. That stopped me in my tracks. The kids. I didn't want them to grow up in a broken home, but I also didn't want them to think it was okay to stay in a relationship where trust and respect didn't exist. I'll think about it, I said finally. But right now I need space. When the call ended, I felt no closer to an answer, but one thing was clear. No matter what happened, my life would never be the same. Amber's sudden plea for reconciliation felt hollow, and while part of me wanted to take the high road, another part, the part that was drowning in anger and betrayal, wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. She had shattered my world without a second thought, and now she wanted me to patch it up? No, not yet. I started thinking about how to make her understand the depth of the pain she'd caused, and before I knew it, an idea began to take shape. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I needed her to feel what I felt, to see how it felt to have your world yanked out from under you. Amber had always cared deeply about appearances. She loved being admired and respected, especially among her friends and coworkers. So, I decided to hit her where it would hurt the most, her image. First, I went through the photos and screenshots I'd saved from her emails and texts with Jake. I made sure to have everything neatly organized, dates, messages, even hotel confirmations. It wasn't just about collecting evidence for myself anymore. It was about creating a narrative she couldn't spin. Next, I reached out to someone who'd been on the sidelines of our life for years. Her sister, Rachel. Rachel and Amber weren't exactly close, but Rachel had always been honest, sometimes brutally so. If anyone could hold Amber accountable, it was her. I invited Rachel over for coffee one morning while the kids were at school. She walked in, clearly curious about why I'd asked her to come. What's going on, Ethan? You sounded off. I wasted no time. I need to show you something, I said, pulling out my laptop and opening the folder with the screenshots. Rachel's face went from confusion to shock as she scrolled through the messages and photos. Oh my God, she whispered. Amber's been cheating. I confirmed, my voice flat, with her ex-boyfriend, Jake. It's been going on for months. Rachel sat back, shaking her head. I don't even know what to say. Does she know you know? Oh, she knows, I said bitterly. We've already fought about it. She's tried to downplay it, to justify it, but I'm done with the lies. I just thought you should know what's really going on. Rachel stared at the screen for a long moment before closing the laptop. Ethan, I don't condone what she's done, but what are you planning to do with this? I hesitated. I don't know yet, but she needs to face the consequences. Rachel nodded slowly. She does. But don't let this consume you, Ethan. Think about the kids. Her words stuck with me. I didn't want to hurt the kids, but I also didn't want Amber to walk away from this unscathed. That evening, I finalized the next step in my plan. Amber was hosting a gathering at our house the following weekend, a casual get-together with some of her friends and a couple of coworkers. She'd been planning it for weeks, and I'd agreed to help with the food and setup. But now I saw it as the perfect opportunity. I decided to print out a few of the milder screenshots, enough to imply what had happened without going overboard. Then, I slipped them into envelopes labeled with her name. During the party, I'd placed them somewhere her guests would inevitably find. It was petty, yes, but I wanted her to feel the sting of humiliation, to know that her actions had consequences. The night of the party arrived, and I played my part perfectly, smiling, greeting guests, and acting as if nothing was wrong. Amber, of course, was in her element, laughing and chatting like the perfect hostess. I bided my time, waiting for the right moment to put my plan into motion. The party was in full swing. Amber was glowing, surrounded by her friends, co-workers, and a few mutual acquaintances. It was the kind of evening she thrived in. Attention on her, compliments flowing, laughter filling the room. I watched from the sidelines, holding a beer, playing the supportive husband role one last time. I'd slipped the envelopes into strategic locations earlier. One in the bathroom drawer where Amber's friends were bound to freshen up, another in the pantry where people were grabbing snacks, and the last one on the coffee table, tucked just slightly under a magazine. Each one contained a handful of carefully selected screenshots, just enough to leave no doubt about what had been happening, but not so explicit as to be cruel. It didn't take long for the first discovery. I was standing by the kitchen island when I heard a gasp from the bathroom hallway. A few women huddled together, whispering, and then one of them came out holding the envelope like it was radioactive. "Amber?" she called, her voice laced with concern and confusion. "Can we talk to you for a second?" Amber's smile faltered. "What's up?" she asked, walking over to them. The woman handed her the envelope, and as Amber opened it, I watched her face change. First confusion, then horror, then anger. She snapped her head toward me, her eyes blazing. "Ethan, can I talk to you? Now." Her voice was low and sharp, the fake cheerfulness gone. I followed her to the kitchen, where she rounded on me as soon as we were out of earshot. "What the hell is this?" she hissed, waving the envelope in my face. "Looks like the truth, doesn't it?" I said, keeping my voice calm. "You didn't think people deserved to know who they were really dealing with? You're unbelievable," she spat. "You're ruining my party. Our party. What do you think this is going to solve?" "I think it's going to solve the problem of you pretending to be someone you're not," I shot back. "You've been lying to everyone, your friends, your co-workers, me. Maybe it's time you faced the consequences." Amber looked like she wanted to scream, but before she could say anything, one of her co-workers walked into the kitchen. "Amber," she said hesitantly, "we found another envelope." Amber closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as if trying to will herself into calmness. "I'll be there in a minute," she said through gritted teeth. Once her coworker left, Amber turned back to me. "You're a spiteful, petty bastard. You know that?" "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But at least I'm not a liar." The rest of the evening was chaos. Word spread quickly, and by the time the third envelope was discovered, most of the guests knew something was up. People whispered, shot Amber questioning looks, and a few left early. Amber tried to play it off, but her usually flawless facade was cracking. I could see the humiliation in her eyes, the panic as her perfect world unraveled. By the time the last guest left, the house was silent except for the sound of Amber pacing the living room. I sat on the couch, waiting for the inevitable explosion. "You've ruined everything," she said finally, her voice shaking with rage. "Do you even care what this is going to do to us? To the kids?" I stood up, meeting her glare. "You did this, Amber. Not me. Don't you dare put this on me." She opened her mouth to argue but then stopped, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked defeated. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" she asked quietly. "Is this your way of telling me you're done?" I stared at her, the woman I'd once loved more than anything, and realized that she was right. I was done. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady. I'll talk to the lawyer tomorrow. You can stay here tonight, but I'm taking the kids to my parents' house tomorrow morning. Amber didn't say anything. She just sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. As I walked away, heading upstairs to pack a bag, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. The morning after the party, I woke up early and started packing a bag for the kids. They didn't know what had happened yet, and I wasn't ready to explain. All they knew was that we were going to visit Grandma and Grandpa for a little while. Amber was still on the couch when I came downstairs, her makeup smeared and eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say a word as I walked past her, the kids following behind me, chattering happily, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "Ethan," Amber said softly as I reached the door. I turned to face her, feeling the weight of the moment. "What?" "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "For everything." I stared at her for a long moment, searching for any sincerity in her eyes. Maybe she was sorry, but sorry didn't undo the lies, the betrayal, or the months of humiliation I'd endured. "It's too late, Amber," I said quietly. "Take some time to think about what you want, but as far as I'm concerned, we're done." I left without waiting for a response. At my parents' house, I finally had a chance to breathe. My mom, ever the perceptive one, didn't push for details, but I could tell she knew something was wrong. "Whatever it is," she said as she hugged me tightly, "you'll get through it. You're stronger than you think." Her words stuck with me over the next few weeks as I navigated the fallout of my marriage. Amber and I began discussing custody arrangements, and while she initially pushed back on the divorce, she eventually conceded. It was clear even to her that there was no coming back from what she'd done. Jake, as far as I know, disappeared from her life not long after the party. Whether he lost interest or Amber realized he wasn't worth the trouble, I'll never know. Honestly, I didn't care. My focus was on the kids and rebuilding my life. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Amber kept the house as I didn't want the kids to lose their sense of stability, but I made sure I got joint custody. I moved into a modest apartment nearby and began piecing my life back together. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness was unbearable, when I second-guessed everything I'd ever done. But slowly I found a new normal. Looking back, I've realized that Amber's betrayal taught me some hard truths about myself and relationships. I'd spent so much of our marriage trying to be the perfect provider, the reliable husband, that I'd missed the signs that our connection was eroding. That doesn't excuse what she did. Not by a long shot, but it's a lesson I'll carry with me moving forward. If I could give anyone in a similar situation advice, it would be this: trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. And above all, know your worth. Staying in a relationship where you're not respected or valued isn't noble. It's self-destructive. As for Amber, I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her either. She's just someone I used to know. Someone I built a life with once, but who ultimately wasn't meant to be part of my future. And you know what? That's okay. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.